first camera, which is a Yasser FXD. It's a 35mm camera. And I got it as a gift from my father when I was 17, which is about when I started photographing. As a youngster, I used to like to write. But I realized the writing was keeping a record, you know, of what was happening inside. And at the time, maybe I didn't vocalize it to myself, but it was so that at a later stage in my life, I can look back and see, you know, where I was, you know, what kind of a person I was. And, you know, all those many years, however long down the line, you know, I'd have a look at it and I could see, okay, you know, how have I changed? And has it been for the better or the worse? I realized very quickly that photography was an easier way of doing that because I was also lazy. And I realized that in shooting, I had the opportunity of recording how I looked at the world, and in a way that wasn't as mediated as writing, because when you write, you have to find specific words to squeeze meaning into, and in a way it can sometimes be leading. You know, you start writing something and because of the way you are educated or socialized, you know, the writing takes on a life of its own, which is not necessarily an accurate reflection of, you know, what you're trying to communicate. But with photography, I found that, you know, the meanings that you ascribe was more open, you know, and in that there's also, for other people, there's room to interact with it and derive their own meaning. I remember the first roll of film. I was still at high school at the time, and it was the memorial services of Chris Hani. And I remember the principal at the time, Mr. Mayer, making an announcement via the intercom saying we should avoid the city by all costs and walk around the city and not go through the city. And, you know, and obviously I was thinking to myself, wow, this is probably a good opportunity to get my camera. And I remember I snuck out of the house, I took my camera, I convinced two friends of mine from my class to go into the city with me, you know. It was mayhem and chaos in the city center that morning, you know. People were getting shot, people next to us were getting shot with buckshot, it was like tear gas, they were burning cars and bikes and looting shops. It was crazy. I remember a lot of the work that a lot of the shots that I had were shaky. That's because I was shaking. In a way, it kind of was responsible for, you know, giving me direction in my photography in terms of, you know, narrative and story. When I started working for the Mail and Guardian, I was very fortunate because I realized, you know, that I didn't want to take photographs of accident scenes and, you know, carnage and blood and guts and all of that, because I believe that whatever you see, it stays inside your heart and it affects you and it influences you. And I thought to myself, look, I don't want that. You know, I want to tell people stories, but I don't want to go into the gory stuff. I don't want to go into the bloody stuff. I want to tell, you know, I want to tell real stories with a view to, you know, uplifting and understanding people. The first job that I did for the Mail and Guardian, it was, I remember I just sent up my portfolio, and I got the details from another good friend of mine, Godstead, who passed on a couple of years ago. He was a photographer for Die Burger, you know, and he's a good friend of mine, and he basically showed me how to process and print in the darkroom. He had a little darkroom that he allowed me to use. And I saw him at an event, the Return of the Elders, where Nelson Mandela was present, you know, giving the houses back to people in District 6, and there was a lot of people. And I was the only one with a film camera. And I only had a 50mm lens, and I needed a really good shot. And the only way I was going to get it was by getting close to him. And eventually I kind of figured out how they operate. And I saw, because what they do is they scout out the next place for him to go. You know, and the guy was prodding me in my ribs, was standing at the gate. And there was a moment that passed, you know, and I kind of, with my eyes, I went, yo, bro, let me get in, you know. And then he was like, okay, go. And then I was the only photographer with him at this particular house, you know, with a family. And that was the shot that they published in the Mail and Guardian. Very often, there's the unspoken agreement. I'm allowing you to take my photo, so that you can tell people my story. You know, and that's got to do with this notion that we have of legacy and who we are. And once we leave here, what do we leave behind?